Okay. Okay. Welcome, everyone. My name is Tom Pickerel. I'm the Global Director of the Ocean Programme at the World Resources Institute. And for this session, we're going to be focusing on one of the places where planetary change shows up first, fastest, and most dramatically, the polar oceans. So the Arctic and the Antarctic are the Earth's climate canaries, and they are the systems that warn us earliest when the planet is under stress. And right now they are facing converging pressures of things like record sea ice loss, rapid warming, ocean acidification, biodiversity decline, and of course, rising geopolitical competition. And what happens in the poles absolutely does not stay in the poles. Their destabilization influences global weather extremes, food systems, sea level rise, migration patterns, and our ability to hit the climate targets that we've set. And the science is clear that the window to safeguard these regions is narrowing, but it hasn't yet closed. There are still opportunities for us to protect these critical ecosystems and avoid the most dangerous tipping points. And to help us understand what must happen next, today we've brought together a remarkable panel for you of a scientist, a policy leader, an activist, and an investor, each offering a unique lens on protecting the polar oceans and accelerated coordinated, high-ambition action. So our goal today is simple. We want to leave you with clarity on what must happen now and inspiration for what's possible if we act with urgency and scale. So, with no further ado, I am delighted to welcome you to our superb panel featuring Anne-Sophie Roux, Levke Caesar, Rita Maria L. Zaghloul, and Christian Lim. Okay, and as our panelists make the stage, I'll give you a brief introduction to each of them. So first up, we have Anne-Sophie Roux. And Anne-Sophie is an ocean activist and a policy advisor. She's been campaigning against deep-sea mining since 2021, first as an activist, then as an advisor to the French Minister of the Sea in 2024. She has just come back from the Antarctic as a scientist on an expedition where she launched a campaign to protect the Antarctic Peninsula together with a collection of other scientists and activists. Next up, we have Dr. Levke Caesar, and Dr. Levke is a climate scientist specializing in Earth systems dynamics and planetary boundary science. Her work focuses on understanding the impacts of human activities on global systems, with a particular emphasis on ocean circulation, climate tipping points, and sustainability. And Dr. Caesar co-leads the Planetary Boundary Science team, contributing to advancing the representation of Earth systems in global frameworks. Next up, we have Christian Lim. Christian is the co-managing partner of Sven Blue Ocean, which is a venture capital strategy investing in innovations that help regenerate ocean biodiversity. It manages over 370 million euros across 2 funds and has invested in more than 20 companies. The first fund was recognized by the World Economic Forum's Uplink as a top innovative fund for our future, and Harvard Business School wrote a case study about it. And Christian also served as the founding co-chair of 1,000 Ocean Startups, which is a global coalition bringing together the ocean impact innovation ecosystem, and is also hosted by the World Economic Forum. Next, we have Rita L. Zaghloul, who is the Director of Secretariat for the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People. We call it the HAC. And the HAC is a coalition of 123 countries who are championing the protection of 30% of our planet's land and ocean by 2030. So that's the 30 by 30 target. The hack was awarded the Earthshot Prize for Revive Our Oceans in 2024. And previously, Rita served as the Minister Councillor at Costa Rica's mission to the UN, where she led negotiations on peace and security, sustainable development, and climate issues. So, we've got a superb panel for you, and thank you so much for joining us. Okay, so we're going to have a bit of a chat amongst ourselves, and hopefully you find some good, interesting outputs here. So I'm going to begin with Anne-Sophie. You've just returned from Antarctica. What were you doing there, and what did you observe?
Firstly, thank you so much, everyone, for being here and for being so numerous to talk about the polar systems and polar oceans. I was part of an expedition in the peninsula of Antarctica with two organizations. One is Under the Pole and the other one is Malizia Explorer, which are two scientific vessels which we were in the Antarctic Peninsula, which is the northwest of the continent. The goal was firstly to be leading scientific expeditions. So divers from the CNRS were diving under the ice of Antarctica and discovering ecosystems that basically have never been seen by a human eye before, which was pretty unique, pretty amazing, pretty beautiful, but also pretty fragile. And that's what really we saw in Antarctica, both underwater and at the surface, is the breathtaking beauty, but also the fragility. And one thing that is really striking is the fact that for once we arrive in time in Antarctica, and this is pretty special because most of the time we arrive after the impacts, devastating impacts are made on ecosystems, and for once here we have a chance to act before it's too late. And so that's why we also work on the campaign to protect the peninsula of Antarctica and to call for the protection of a marine protected area called Domain 1, which is in this area and has been in negotiation for almost 10 years and it's still not been made. So that's what we are campaigning for together with scientists and activists.
Great, thank you very much. And Levke, you're a planetary scientist. What are some of the concerning things that you're seeing in both Antarctica and the Arctic at the moment?
Yeah, before I answer that, I want to give the framing that I'm a climate scientist, so I might be looking at this through the climate science lens. And what is really scaring me is that Antarctica, Greenland, those are huge ice sheets. Together they contain enough frozen water to rise global sea levels more than 60, that's 60 meters. And while they are still there, we do see signs of destabilization. And we can actually see that in the time series where we have data, where we monitored these ice sheets over some time. We can actually see ice sheet loss from space. It's actually kind of cool science. You can look at the gravity, the attraction of the ice sheets and how that is changing over time. And both ice sheets are showing these signs. We know that there are feedback loops, self-reinforced loops that are governing these ice sheets, both from the surface in the sense of we're lowering the ice sheet's heights, the elevation is decreasing, the top is in now warmer weather, but also from underneath, from the ocean. Sometimes the ice sheet bedrock is actually sloping down, water can get in and can then melt it from below. So we do know a couple of reasons why this melting would accelerate in the future. And coming from West Antarctica, there's actually a lot of scientific evidence saying that West Antarctica has what we call tipped, so that the ice loss of West Antarctica is likely unstoppable and irreversible for a long, long time.
Right, thank you. Christian, on your introduction, we mentioned that you're one of the co-founding chair of 1,000 Startups, and 1,000 Startups is obviously interested in a number of the issues here. Can you tell, maybe not everyone's familiar with that, can you just describe what 1,000 Ocean Startups is and how that work relates to some of the challenges in the polar regions?
So 1,000 Ocean Startups is a coalition that brings together all the organizations that support ocean startups that have solutions for ocean health. So that includes incubators, accelerators, venture capital firms from across the globe, We have members from, from Europe, from North America, from Latin America, from Asia, Africa. And together we have a shared goal, which is to back by 2030, the end of the UN Ocean Decade, at least 1,000 transformative ocean startups. And some of those startups will help address the issues that you mentioned, such as addressing climate change. And we'll go back to that. Many of them actually do this. Or maybe developing satellite solutions that will help better understand what is happening and maybe hold accountable those who are breaking the laws, or hopefully that will be in place around Area 1, for example. So 1,000 ocean startups is highly relevant for the health of the ocean on the planet and for the polar regions. And I'd like also to share an announcement about 1,000 ocean startups. Because it's a very special day here today. Anyone from 1,000 Ocean Startups here could raise your hands? Yes, we have some friends here. We were launched 5 years ago at Change Now. When we started, we were six members. We had maybe a few hundred million under management, and we were just starting our goal to support 1,000 Ocean Startups. Today, we're celebrating the 5-year anniversary. And I'm happy to announce that now we have 66 members across the entire globe. We've backed together more than 850 startups and managed collectively more than $3 billion. So the movement is growing. What started here can lead to somewhere, and today is a day to celebrate and to prepare for the next five years. Thank you.
Well worthy of a clap. Christian, you mentioned the importance of 2030, and of course, one of the other targets for 2030 is the 30 by 30 initiative. And Rita, you actually played a central role in securing the Global Biodiversity Framework's 30 by 30 target, which is fantastic. But not everyone may be familiar with that. So what is 30 by 30, and how is the hack supporting delivery of that, particularly in the polar regions?
Yeah, thank you, Tom, and it's such a pleasure to be with all of you today and the distinguished panelists. So the 30 by 30, how we call it, is mainly the target 3 of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, which is embedded within the Convention on Biological Diversity. The Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework is what we say, for example, for us, for the CBD Convention, as the Paris Agreement. And the 30 by 30 is the target that actually aims to protect at least 30% of our planet's ocean and land by 2030. The High Ambition Coalition, or the HAC, how we call it, because it's a mouthful, it's a coalition of 124 countries, co-chaired by by Nigeria and France. And mainly we focus on 2 elements at the moment. One is technical assistance and capacity building to our country members. So for those 124 country members, we share with them and develop to them tools in order to be able to implement this target. Those tools really try to match the needs of the countries with different partners. So we work with over 75 organizations in order to supply those needs. And we also, for example, in specific regions like the Western Africa, we have supported them in particular in having more of a regional focus on 30 by 30. And so we supported them in creating a regional workshop on 30 by 30 to have more of that regional focus, which I think could also be extrapolated to the polar regions as well. That's the first focus of the coalition, more on the technical assistance and capacity building and the matchmaking. And the second focus is more on political mobilization. And I think the political mobilization is something that we hear a lot, and it's something that we really need to maintain and to activate. And so within the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People, what we do throughout the years, because of course this target was adopted back in 2022, much has changed since then. A lot of our geopolitical situation is different. A lot of the government have changed. We have political cycles. And so the aim of the coalition is really, because it's government-led, is making sure that we have new leadership coming on and ensuring that everyone knows about the importance of this target. And in particular, I think if we're talking about the polar regions, it's critical ecosystems that we need to protect. And so it's mainly through the High Ambition Coalition that we activate those, I would say, leaders or champions in the different regions in order to make sure that the target is kept on the agenda at the highest level and is continued from now until 2030.
Great, thank you, Rita. You mentioned activation, and of course that's critical to get things done. And Anne-Sophie, you work at that intersection between science and public mobilization. What, in terms of the sort of the work you're doing, what's getting through in terms of the narrative to the public, and what's just not landing?
Well, I think when it comes to polar region, the biggest problem that we might have is the fact that these are problems that are vastly overlooked and people don't necessarily know the importance, the central importance of polar regions for us all, for the stability of our climate, for the regulation of the climate, and especially for Antarctica. These places feel so remote, yet whatever happens in Antarctica, and it's also true in the Arctic, is far from being abstract. It's really, the consequences will be very concrete for all of us. And another thing that I think in terms of narrative is really important, especially now in the troubled times that we are living in, is the governance aspect of Antarctica. Because Antarctica is the only continent that belongs to no one. And during the Cold War, countries managed to get along and to say, okay, we are sitting on the table together and we are dedicating this whole continent to peace and to science. And this is actually an amazing example of collective governance that works. Antarctica is still pretty much preserved in many areas. And so in the troubled times that we are in, I think it's also important to preserve this good model of governance, aside from the environmental impacts that are obviously very important in those regions.
Yeah, thank you. And you mentioned the importance of these regions. And Levke, if I could ask you as a scientist, what will happen if we continue this kind of trajectory in the poles? How will it impact us in our everyday life?
Yeah, good question. And I guess the important answer is not what would happen, but also what is happening already. Yeah. And it reaches from, of course, potential sea level rise over food security. But I want to give you a very tangible example, since we are in Paris right now, that the changes in the polar region, and the polar region is warming at rates 2 to 4 times faster than the rest, are actually increasing the likelihood of extreme events in the Northern Hemisphere, in Europe, in Asia, in the US. It sounds maybe a little bit complex, but it's actually fairly maybe simple physics behind that. You probably know the equator is much warmer than the poles. Because of that, we have a stream of air from the equator to the poles. Due to the circulation or the rotation of the Earth, this is leading to different streams, mainly the jet stream. You might know that's the one that is actually getting you faster from the US to Europe than the other way around. And this is really essential in moving weather systems over Europe, over the US. And we are changing the jet stream. We're making it more wobbly and slower, and this can lead to drought conditions or maybe flooding conditions, not lasting 1 or 2 days, but up to weeks. And this is then really causing extreme weather. Maybe causing is the wrong word because it's not the sole cause, but it's really increasing the likelihood of extreme events. So it's not just global warming, but it's changes in the dynamics, and these are partly driven by the polar regions. So basically, when you have really hot summers, that could be because of the polar regions.
Thank you. So we've got to look towards solutions. And going over to you, Christian, with your work with Sven Blue Ocean, obviously investing in solutions, I guess the question for me is, are the poles investable?
So the answer is yes and no, because I think if you listen to scientists, and we're trying to listen as investors and innovators, what I hear, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that yes, the poles are being damaged and faster than the rest of the planet by the emissions we're emitting. But to save the poles, the solution lies for the most part actually on the rest of the planet. You need to actually address climate change at the root and where the emissions are being made. And so to invest in the poles one way to do it is actually to invest in solutions to address climate change everywhere else on the planet. So I see nodding, so I'm reassured. And so in that sense, yes, the poles are investable. And so that's what we're doing. I mean, us at Swan Blue Ocean, a third of our investments are in ocean-based solutions to climate change, but which are not in the poles. It's like the decarbonization of shipping. It's also, it can be marine renewable energy, using the power of waves to desalinate water and things like this. And I know that more than 280 of the startups backed by 1,000 ocean startups as a coalition in the past 5 years are doing exactly this. So that's the yes part. The no part is, can we find an economic model that we can invest in solutions that will prevent climate change locally in the poles? And the answer is so far not really, because the type of solutions that are being considered are often amount to geoengineering that will involve things like cloud brightening or increasing the reflectivity of the ice sheet with salts, for example. But first, again, as investors, we want to listen to science, and so far science hasn't told us this is something safe to do. I mean, I think there's still something that is being explored, so we won't put any money into this before this is clear. And then, yeah, just finding economic models is difficult. So but we can help in other ways. So, for example, we invest in solutions that are global, but help the poles as well. So I mentioned satellites. Those can be solutions that help manage the poles, and those generate revenues not only at the poles but everywhere else on the planet. So those are investable. So I hope that answered a bit of your question.
No, thank you very much. One of the challenges we're facing sort of globally is changing conditions, and one of the key things we've got to do there is have areas of resilience and protection, and that ties very much to the 30 by 30, Rita. If we wanted to establish some marine protected areas or MPAs in the Arctic Ocean or the Southern Ocean, what are some of the major barriers or opportunities?
Yeah, I think I would focus more on the opportunities and take in the case, for example, of the Southern Ocean, which have gigantic sea ice loss and ecosystem disruption, and even more important of why we should actually protect that ecosystem. We had last year a major, in the ocean governance and the multilateral system, we had a major breakthrough with the BBNJ Treaty, or the High Seas Treaty. And I think as a major opportunity, because the Southern Ocean have a lot of data that has been developed and really a lot of advances with regards to marine protected areas. So if we wanted to really put a concrete example to the international community on what could actually be done and how that could be done in areas beyond national jurisdiction, having several governments being coordinated in a quite cohesive manner, I think that would be an excellent opportunity. It would not only showcase the feasibility and really the concrete implementation of the commitments that we have done with the High Seas Treaty, but it would also be a major, of course, win for our ecosystem and for our fight for the climate change and biodiversity loss. So I think making sure that that the data that we already have on which areas we actually need to protect, and the Southern Ocean is an excellent example of how we can do that, and how countries can actually show concretely on the commitments that they have done through the High Seas Treaty.
Great, thank you. Anne-Sophie, you mentioned in your last answer that the polar regions can feel quite remote to some people, and that can be a challenge. So how can the activism, I'll try that again, activism that you're doing, or corporate action, actually get some change in that? How can they get people to relate to the polar regions?
Well, I believe that activism has a really interesting power, a really interesting impact, in terms that it can put the spotlight on topics that are not very well known, to put the spotlight on topics that make it inevitable for politicians to take action on. And activism can really turn something invisible into something political. And so that's really what we are trying to do with Antarctica, and with the creation of this marine protected area. We're also trying to get media attention, also to question our behavior as consumers, because one of the main pressure that is now existing in Antarctica is krill fishing. So krill is this very tiny shrimp that is the basis of all the ecosystems in the Southern Ocean. And it is massively fished. Why? Mainly for fish farms, like for salmon farms, to give the orange color to salmon. Is this really necessary for humanity? I'm not sure. Also for pet food. And so all the question that we as consumers, all the power that we as consumers have, I think is really important to shed a light on. And then the idea is also to pressure and to ask our governments to take action now before any tipping point is being reached, because once again in the Antarctic Peninsula, this is the area where the krill concentration is the highest. The biodiversity is also very high, and the stability of the whole Southern Ocean really depends on the good health of this ecosystem. So indirectly, we all depend on the good health of the Southern Ocean as well. And so we are basically asking all the countries that are negotiating to create the marine protected area in this area, which is called Domain 1. It's been in negotiation for almost 10 years. Right now we have Norway and China, who are the main ones to be blocking it. So yeah, the idea is basically to raise awareness, to raise political pressure, to raise media attention, and to question our power in terms of consumers, to also address, to put pressure on the industry as well, and on the economic sides of it.
Thank you. Levke, we mentioned tipping points, and for many people that might be a bit of an abstract term that they roughly know what it is, but what tipping point or tipping points are you, as a planetary climate scientist, concerned about?
Yes, I partly don't even want to answer that question because I feel like it might give certain weight to some of the tipping points and take weight away from others. Because we do see, for example, that ecosystems are being harmed right now, and there we are partly just really missing the scientific evidence, the data to show what they're important for. And that doesn't mean they're not important, it just means we need still some data. But what I can definitely say where we have enough data and evidence is that from an Earth system stability point of view, of course it's the ice sheet. As I mentioned, West Antarctica has tipped, but it's also, for example, the Arctic sea ice, which in a strict definition is not always called a tipping element because there is some way of actually regrowing it, but it definitely has a feedback loop as we are losing the Arctic sea ice. And this year, just a few days ago, it had the maximum winter extent and it was the lowest ever. So you can basically imagine Arctic sea ice grows in the winter and then it melts in the summer and grows again. Now, we are slowing down this process in the sense we're losing more and more Arctic sea ice, but it's important as an ecosystem, but also just as an Earth system stabilizer, because it's reflecting a lot of sunlight and it's not doing that if it's gone. So that is something that worries me quite a lot.
Yes, thank you very much. Christian, you mentioned, I think you explained that really well about not necessarily investing in the poles, but investing elsewhere to solve the challenges felt at the poles. So, hypothetical question for you. If you could redirect global finance flows tomorrow, what 2 or 3 priorities would you focus on?
So I have 2 priorities in mind that will help, in particular, the activists, I think. So the first one is actually solutions for ocean data. I'm talking about, of course, the satellites that will capture data about and will tell us about what is happening on the poles, but also talking about the new the latest developments of AI with large language models that now can go and take this data, analyze it, and make it available and understandable to anyone, not only scientists and policymakers, but also the layman and the activist without a degree, PhD degree in science. And I think this type of tool would be incredibly powerful to actually, further amplify and accelerate the voice of activists and consumers that want to know what is happening and shout about it. So I think, yes, that would be incredible. I think investments to make, and that would also benefit activism. On the other side, you also, as an activist, I think you want to, highlight the challenges, but also if you can show solutions, it makes it easier for the policymaker to actually, act. And so I would also direct flows to alternatives to fish meal and fish oil, which are and astaxanthin, which are actually used in aquaculture to feed farmed salmon, for example, and actually coming from wild-caught fish or krill from the Antarctica. And so there are solutions today based on bacteria, fungi, insects, microalgae. Personally, we have invested in a company like MyAlgae in Scotland that actually produces omega-3 from microalgae as a substitute to krill in particular and fish oil. And so those are the type of solutions that are highly scalable, that don't change our habits as consumers, and that can actually empower authorities and policymakers to make the right decision, because they know if they say no to something, there's something else to come and actually replace the legacy products. So that's what I would do.
Great, thank you. So I've got one final question for Rita, then I'm going to end with one rapid fire, the same question for each of you. So Rita, first, before we move on to that, we talked about marine protected areas in the polar regions. One question is, how do we ensure that they're enforced properly? Because they are miles away from many people.
Yes, and that's, I think it's a question that we face across the board. I mean, as you know, the HAC, we work with many different regions, and it's one of the questions that is really key also for developing countries, because of course, in order to be able to enforce, you have to have the sufficient data and the sufficient resources in order to be able to do that. So I think it's it comes in, I would say, two main elements. One is coordination. That would be key in order to make sure that there's accountability. And the second one is more, I would say it's not such a maybe popular idea, but more of a verification process, because at the moment we don't have a verification process with regards to our protected areas in general. So making sure that there is some kind of a system for verification in order to make sure that not only those areas are actually designated, but they are effectively managed, and there is accountability in case this is not the case. So I think mainly focusing on those two key criteria would be essential.
Great, thank you. So our final one question to each of you. So if you each had to name one breakthrough, and it can be scientific, financial, political, that would protect the poles in the next decade, what would it be? Do you want to go first?
For me, the first starting point would be the creation of this marine protected area. It's just the first one of many others that needs to be created. So domain one would be the first one, at least to preserve the stability of the Southern Ocean and therefore its role in stabilizing our global climate.
Thank you. Rita?
Yeah, I would go back to that same one. I think it's the MPA in the Southern Ocean, which would be the large-scale high seas protected area, which would also signal, I think it would have a domino effect as well. So I think that for me would be the major breakthrough of the next decade.
Thank you. Levke?
Yes, I actually want to go at it from the other way around, that it would be one of the worst things we can do is wait for a scientific breakthrough at least, because we know scientifically what is the best thing we can do for the poles, that is reducing emission, reducing climate change, and probably when it comes to the ecosystems, leaving the poles alone. No exploitation for minerals or whatever, but leave it be.
So I'd say reducing emissions as well, and if you want a specific type of solution, I think if we can find a new way to produce energy abundantly in a way that is safe and clean, that would be key. And you know, there are a number of solutions being explored, like fusion energy. So why not?
Great. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed that, and I hope you've actually learnt some things. It's been incredible. Thank you so much, everyone.